backwards compatibility.
Don't get your hopes up.
Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, Mr.
Sawbridge is bringing you guys lucky episode 97.
Since we were wrong last week, as we were told, we realized that once we got... Me and Saul were talking about it afterwards because he listens to the episodes over after we put them out. I don't.
Quality
so
control check.
Glad he does it. It goes to show you the fun of cold intros. So I guess, we've never really talked about the way we go about recording, but we record the cold intro before the intro, literally. We just, quickly think about what we want to say. And Saul was going to say, get your hopes up. And then I said, are you sure you don't want to say don't get your hopes up? He's like, nah, man, I got it. And then immediately when he says it, he accidentally said, don't get your hopes up. So you know what?
It's meant to be imposed as a question like possibly this is coming.
Yeah, fun times though. Anyway, if you've never joined us before, we are, like we said, Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. You can find us on video format every Monday at 10 a.m. PST and 12 p.m. CST on YouTube. If you like what we're doing over there, give us a subscribe, hit the bell notification to let you know when these episodes go live, as well as our reader mails that go live every other Friday, and anything else we start doing as we work towards kind of changing the channel from being Nartech Gaming into Nartech, because as patrons of us have seen, our patrons of our general channel, Nartech, have seen we've been working on an off-topic podcast that we are probably going to start doing bi-weekly. We're trying to figure out scheduling for that right now, but we wanted to kind of do a proof of concept that we released as essentially episode 0 to our patrons. So thanks for the feedback on that we've gotten. We appreciate it. And I think I had a ton of fun doing it, and I think Blaze did really well. So I think we're in a good spot to go ahead and move forward with it. But anyway, that's all stuff that you can see on YouTube if you subscribe over there. If you want to listen to all this in audio format only, you can do so on any podcast service. I hope now. We just recently added ourselves to Stitcher and TuneIn. Those are two that I was unaware of, that you have to manually add your,
What is this, 2008?
I guess it makes sense.
Exist for a reason.
But with all that said, you can find us on, hopefully, and if you know of one that was not, then just tell us, but most podcast providers... and you can find us, of course, whether you're on an Android or an Apple phone, doesn't matter. You can find us on a computer. You can listen to us however you want to. If you want to find us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Triangle SQRD. That's our handle. You can find us on Facebook, Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. If you ask to join that group, we'll gladly accept you in. Those are the two main places that we take questions for the Reader Mail episodes that we do bi-weekly, though we also do them from YouTube. They're not guaranteed to be answered. We'll like them if we think they're great questions. And of course, if you support us on Patreon, which you can do so at patreon.com/Nartech, you can get your questions asked, or you can ask your questions there. I'll try and keep up with the post there, though I did miss it last week, so sorry, patrons. Kingdom Hearts 3's ruined everything for me.
And the questions go for all YouTube videos we do. So if it's a Reader Mail or Triangle Squared episode, or if we put the off-topic podcast on there, if you ask us a question in any of those, we'll like it. So you don't think you're bound to an episode of any particular kind.
And, Saul's never fret, never fear. We'll answer all questions. We just had a crazy amount last week, and we were wanting to play Kingdom Hearts. So, we have told the two people that we ended up kind of taking their banked questions and separated them out. We appreciate y'all giving us the banked questions, but alas, this is not the Reader Mail episode, so I guess we'll go ahead and go into this. And Saul, the way we always start the show, what have you been playing? I think I know the answer because of course, the fact that we've been playing since
I've been playing
Reader Mail recorded
all Kingdom Hearts, but I'm also kind of sick. I don't know. Can you hear that in my voice? It's always weird when it comes to your own voice.
Yeah, I can hear it slightly. It's not terrible, but it's there.
But I've been sick since Wednesday, so I really got to play a lot on Tuesday for Kingdom Hearts, and then Wednesday I tried to play a little bit, but I ended up kind of nodding off due to the NyQuil.
Okay.
So Thursday didn't get to play any. Yesterday I was off, which was Friday. I got to play probably 4 hours of it.
Rookie numbers, boy, you got to get them up.
I didn't feel good. I literally
you can't slam in the big leagues, man. If you're gonna put those numbers in.
I popped my earbuds in, and then I listened to some Shinigami, and then I fell asleep. And then I woke up, and then we went to Domino's.
So you weren't playing Kingdom Hearts, but you were feeling it in your soul.
I was feeling it in my soul.
I got you.
Shinigami, but that's honestly really it. Like, I did play a little bit of Destiny 2, but not really enough to even bring up. I played like less than an hour of Destiny 2.
Okay.
And I really did that because one of my friends that we played Destiny with, Joe, I saw him playing Kingdom Hearts, and I noticed that we both started it up at the same time on Tuesday, and then we both he jumped on a Destiny 2, and then I was like, I'll go play with Destiny 2 with Joe for a little while to kind of wrap my night up. And then he started at the same time I did, and we got to the exact same spot at the same time. Like, we literally stopped at the saving spot in the second world. So
okay,
that's pretty much it.
Random happenstance, huh?
Yeah.
Or maybe you and Joe are the same person that have been split apart.
Feels like it.
You're the light version, and he's the dark version of you.
That's
Vin Vanitas.
You're a little racist.
First of all, that's just on the nose observation, sir. Who's to say light and dark is any bad? In terms of Kingdom Hearts terms. I love talking about Kingdom Hearts anyway when you think about that, because
that's what I'm trying to be. Like, I really want to know. Obviously, we're not going to do any spoilers at all.
No, yeah, but obviously it's what I've been playing too. But what I was getting at with that is I was telling someone the other day about what makes, I think, Xehanort such an interesting bad guy is that his actions are obviously like evil, but when you think about the motivation behind his and that's why I like talking about good and evil, is that the whole thing for him is just balance.
Especially,
as far as he's concerned, light has had too much of a stronghold on the world for too long, and he wants to see it balanced, and he wants to recreate the world in his image of perfect light and dark balance. And I think that's pretty interesting, because it's easy to understand why someone would want that, because sometimes I think humans are like we're a little humans tend to want to be kind of optimistic most of the time, which when you're thinking about the metaphor of how it goes in, it's like we like to be light, but at the same time there's the realistic aspect of world coming in and not always being matching with the optimism that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it's an interesting thing, because you can see why at least analytically, if you are a logical person, you're like, okay, I see why he'd want balance. Too much of anything is bad.
What's interesting is that even though he craves a completely equal world, Kingdom Hearts requires almost a double amount of darkness compared to light.
Yeah. Or at least the Keyblade does.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting. But
yeah,
Kingdom Hearts has been about all I've been playing, too. I don't think I've played literally anything else. At least, I mean, obviously we played Anthem after we recorded the last episode, if you don't listen to the reader mails. But outside of that, man, once Kingdom Hearts got in, that's about it. I don't think I've played anything else. So we can quickly move away from that section. But now it's time to
hop into the drop.
Drop to the hop.
Nope, hop into the drop. So for those that don't know, this is this week's PlayStation releases across all of its platforms. First up on the list, we have Access Denied for PS4 and PS Vita, across by title. We have Ages of Mages, The Last Keeper for PS4. Away, Journey to the Unexpected for PS4. Crisis VR Brigade. So Crisis V Brigade, basically.
I guess it's trying to say brigade, but like Brigade.
I was going to say Brigade with a V.
It's a bad name. I don't think
it doesn't flow. Elk Simulator, for PS4. Evoland Legendary Edition for PS4. Fear of Bugs, The Fear Experience for PSVR. Glass Masquerade for PS4. God Eater 3 for PS4. The Mage's Tale for PSVR. Melbit's World for PS4. Monster Energy Supercross, the official video game 2.
There was a first one?
For PS4.
We're missing out, man.
Pipe Push Paradise for PS4. Pro Fishing Simulator for PS4. Rage Room for PS4. PSVR, I'm sorry. Riot Civil Unrest for PS4. Shanky The Vegan's Nightmare for PS4. Spike Volleyball for PS4, and that's the last on the list. I'm not afraid to say it. There's a lot of names in that this week's releases that are just really bad titles.
They're bad titles in terms of names.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're bad games, but
exactly.
I'd be willing to wager.
Really bad titles.
I'm so disappointed that I already can tell you just by looking at the picture behind Elk Simulator, and just because of the name, it's not what I wished it would be, which is, don't get me wrong, it's stupid, but essentially Go Simulator as an elk, walking around as an elk doing stupid stuff.
How do you know that? Like, do you think it's a hunting game? Or
I'm 99% positive it's an elk hunting game.
Why is it called Elk Simulator then?
Because you're simulating elk hunting, but it still should be called Elk Hunting Simulator.
What is this? Okay, there's some really bad images on Google for Elk Simulator.
I don't think
it looks like 2005 Steam games.
Okay, all right.
Brett, why don't you hop into the news?
All right, news is interesting more than anything this time around. Let's see. First thing out, Sony has sent out beta invites for PS4 firmware 6.50 to previous firmware beta testers, so they did not have a sign-up period for this one. The email claims that the update, quote, does not include any new major consumer-facing features, end quote. So it looks like as far as I can tell here, there was no sign up for it. They just sent it to people because they started the beta program. I assume that this is probably signaling the end of actually big PlayStation 4 firmware updates as we look forward to next gen and PS5. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that makes sense. It's easy to think that the PS4 has been around and I guess because we're more tuned into it, it feels like it's been almost a shorter time than other things.
Yeah.
At the same time, it feels like it's been a long time. So I think that it'd be reasonable if we don't get any new real major features as far as firmware goes at this point.
It's reached max stability. Can't go any further.
Yeah. Well, you think so. You just wait. And when 6.51 comes out to increase that system stability even more, just when you thought it couldn't go any further, they find a way. Next up, Square Enix have revealed the new playable race for the Shadowbringers expansion of Final Fantasy XIV Online. So if you play that, or if you have played it before, there you go. It's called the Vera, as far as I can tell, is what it looks like. They also revealed a raid created by Yoko Taro and Yosuke Saito that is inspired by Nier Automata, so that's pretty cool. They had like a little picture of the race wearing what, as far as I could imagine, it looked like they were 2B or at least Nier Automata related clothing. I like that. Pretty cool. And I like the idea of a raid being done by that.
That's what I thought.
How do raids work out in 14 Online?
The Viera or the Rabbit Race from 12.
Oh, okay.
That's what I thought. I was like, that sounds too familiar. Raids, though, they work out in terms
Viera. Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
Of like dungeons, I guess, quote unquote, where it's 12 men, 2 tanks, 4 DPS, I'm pretty sure. 4 healers. Like I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head.
Oh yeah, and you don't have to glue to those numbers, right? You can. I mean, obviously you'd want to, but does the game force you?
I'm pretty sure it does. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
I've never entered a dungeon or a raid without. I got really I've only ever done one of the 12-man dungeon raids or whatever they're called. I don't even think what I did was a raid technically. I'm pretty sure what I just did was was a dungeon. But I chickened out because I was tank, and then there was another tank. There's only 2 of us. And we had to pull all of the aggro. And it was very stressful because I couldn't tell if I was messing up or if the DPS was pulling early. I couldn't do it though. And I had all of the
So you love the game, but you've experienced part of it. No, and I'm not. No, don't get me wrong. I've had similar experiences in MMOs.
I love Final Fantasy 14. I've made 6 total characters now. No, 5 total characters. And I've played through the story all 5 of those times up until that mission. That's the last mission in the story mode is where you go to that dungeon. It's the first one you can unlock, to my knowledge, as well. Since I've played, there might be some changes now, but yeah, okay. It's really good, and I like this. I really dig the Yoko Taro raid. It is going to be kind of interesting, I think.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I get that more than anything. It seems like it's acting as a crossover. Definitely what I'm talking about, the picture of the Viera playing in the Automata inspired suits, if nothing else. But, do you remember a while back when one of the heads up at Square Enix was saying that he thought it would be interesting to let Yoko Taro make a Final Fantasy game? And
this is probably the solution instead of an actual game.
Well, I wonder if instead of a solution, which it could be, or if this is dipping the toes in the water.
Now, dipping the toes in the water was Verum Rex.
For Yoko Taro?
Yeah, that was Yoko Taro made. You didn't see the credits?
That would be really, really interesting.
Didn't the mechs give it off?
No, they did not at all.
Oh, they should have.
But, I mean, either way, I think it looks to me, and I'm going to be the optimist as time back into our earlier thing as far as saying that I think that this to me looks like it could very well just be dipping the toes in the water to see how he handles Final Fantasy as a franchise. But at the same time, I don't know. I'm still of the mindset that I would still like to really see, and regardless of, I think that there's a number of things that happened with Versus 13 that weren't necessarily on the back of Tetsuya Nomura. When you think about it this way, ultimately, Kingdom Hearts did not take that long to develop for a new game coming out on new hardware. I mean, it may have been a sequel, but it's a sequel in the sense of there's a bunch of other games that came out, and the only time that they really worked on the hardware was through a remaster. So when you're trying to think about building up tools from the ground up to be able to make this game, him taking essentially 4 years to make the game since the Unreal Engine 4 reboot, moving the whole game, that's not that weird.
No.
As far as I'm concerned. So I think when you look at that...
It just feels like it's been a lot longer because well, a lot of people, the last time they played a Kingdom Hearts game was 2.
Yeah, sure.
when you
And
look
I
at
mean,
it, it's been
but if you talk about it just from announcement, which really I don't agree
almost
with the
a
way
little
they
bit longer than a
chose to
decade.
announce it, was literally just Kingdom Hearts is in development now. It's like, okay, you should probably have waited until you had a little more to actually talk about.
They should have really put Kingdom Hearts 2.9. But that would have made sense because 2.8 wasn't a thing.
Yes, you would have been like, what the hell? But look, my point being is that I don't think that a lot of people say that they don't want to see him come back to Final Fantasy because of how long it took him for Versus 13. But when you look at what happened with Versus 13 and the whole Fabula, Crystalla, Novella, or whatever the hell Final Fantasy 13's compendium was going to be made out of, which was supposed to include Agito 13, which ended up becoming Type 0. None of the games ended up being what they were. Type 0, or if you want to think about Agito,
A terrible game.
took forever to come out.
Yeah, that's a bad game.
And if you even want to talk about that, it took forever to come out when it was helmed by the eventual person who took over 15, Tabata.
Can you even play that on Vita?
No, it never came to Vita.
No, I'm
in
not
Japan, probably, yes.
So
but
it's not even on the backwards compatibility.
it probably is in
PSN
Japan. Because it never released in the PSP version, never released in America or the West in general.
How did I play it?
Type 0? You played it. If you played it at all, you played the PS4
PS3.
remaster.
Or no? Was it
PS4
PS4?
remaster. That included the Final Fantasy 15 episode Disguise.
It did.
Yeah.
I remember that now.
Yep. So anyway, my point here is that for all the people that want to say that, I think every game that was kind of melded around Final Fantasy 13 had hell besides 13. And a lot of that, I mean, in 13 had mixed reception. But when you think about it this way, they constantly pulled the team that was supposed to be working on 13 Versus off of 13 Versus to help assist in development of 13. And then they did the same thing with 13.2, and they kept doing that, and they kept, splicing the projects out. They remade Agito into a different game. I mean, when you look at all that, it doesn't seem to me that there's any real proof, as far as we can really tell, that Nomura would have a hard time making a Final Fantasy game. I think that he really wanted to make Versus 13. You could tell by what he was doing and the fact that the Virum Rex thing in Kingdom Hearts. I'm just going to say this. In Kingdom Hearts 3 has obviously got a ton of ties. That's all I'm going to say. Into, or if you want to say, a lot of thematical references and general references to a lot of the trailers from Versus 13. So I think that he still wants to live some of those ideas out, and whether he gets to do it in the form of a new IP or if he gets to do it in the form of a new Final Fantasy game, that'd be great. But of course that means it'd have to come after 7, because my final bit of that is, why would Square Enix, who have constantly said they weren't going to remake 7 until they were sure that they could remake 7 with the same level of quality that 7 was considered when it released, why would they give it to Tetsuya Nomura if they thought that he completely fumbled with Versus 13?
A counterpoint, though, is we're also seeing something very similar with 7 as the example of taking a while to hear progress and stuff from, especially with yet another game under his helm with a rescrap.
Yeah, and again, I'll say that
That's
a lot of this
three
comes
games
down
this generation.
Yeah, and a lot of
big
this
title games.
And a lot of this comes down to upper management. And he said, Tetsuya said as much himself. Do you not remember seeing the thing where he didn't even know he was going to be the director for Final Fantasy VII Remake until he saw the trailer?
I don't know about all that.
No, don't get me wrong. We don't. But what we have to do is take the information that we're given and be as fair about it as we can. So one thing is that, and then the other thing we learned is that part of the reason that it was taking a while is because they were getting it out to CyberConnect. All right. CyberConnect is just an independent studio that they were going to contract through to have the game started. They decided to pull it in, but they announced that he's going to be the person for Final Fantasy VII after he just announced that Kingdom Hearts 3 is starting development, and he's obviously a key person for Kingdom Hearts 3. What I'm getting at is, I think if it was honestly really up to him, and if he was the one making all the decisions, he probably wouldn't have come out and said that, hey, I'm doing Final Fantasy VII as director, because it doesn't make sense for him to be the director of a game like that that's doing more than just remaking itself. It's reimagining itself. You know what I mean? It's not the exact same game with prettier graphics. It's doing a lot to add and change. So when you think about it that way, I would not have. I mean, if they came to me after being like, oh, yeah, I know you just started Kingdom Hearts 3, but we want you to direct Final Fantasy VII. I'm sure when he learned that he was going to be the director, if that is indeed what happened, he was like, amazing, because it really shows that they have a lot of faith in me on a franchise that, or, an entry to a franchise that's so important to gaming and to us as a company. But I don't think he would have chose to put it out exactly when he did, though there was probably pressure from Sony in terms of Square Enix being like, okay, we're going to go ahead and put it out.
A lot of bad things in play.
I think it's bad decisions
that's what it is.
more than anything.
Yeah.
I don't think it was smart to outsource what you consider to be your most important game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, to a different company. In CyberConnect, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, it was a very bad idea.
And now we know it was a bad idea because they had to pull it back in. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm feeling like, with as much as I'm enjoying Kingdom Hearts 3 and as smooth as it's going, and the fact that it took essentially 4 years for him to develop, and then, the little bit of a delay or whatever, I think that there's no real reason to hit on him so hard. I feel like he's proving himself right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. Maybe he's awful. Maybe, but as far as we see, I think I would still like to see him get to do something in the Final Fantasy realm. But you know what? While we're on the topic of Nier, in terms of the news at least, Nier crossovers. Nier Automata has a crossover in Monster Hunter, but sadly, it's not the one that everybody would probably expect and want. The massively popular and internationally available Monster Hunter World. Instead, it's in the crossover is for the Japanese exclusive MMO of Monster Hunter called Frontier Z that released back in 2016, and we don't even have it. Still cool that Nier's getting all that love, and I hope that maybe the crossover for this ends up leading over into a crossover for World.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Do you remember a couple weeks back, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, we talked about Spider-Man Fantastic Four, little nod that Disney gave out? Well, of course, or Marvel gave out. The tie-in has been revealed and released, and it was exactly as I thought and planned. It was just 2 new suits that are added to the game in the way of the Future Foundation suit and the Bombastic Bagman suit that are free for everyone to download. So if you still want to have a reason to just go and play the game, or if you're just still enjoying it, at least you get to do so with 2 new suits if you want to do that. Another great segue, Insomniac's take on Spider-Man is also announced to be getting its own comic book series. It's been officially announced. The first release, titled City at War #1, marks the first in a series of comics that Marvel is calling the Gameverse, which to me, I didn't see anything go deeper into that. It's just what they called it. But to me, do you think this could be signaling that they plan to, with their renewed focus on making sure that their games are very high quality, that they're going to have a plan to make comic book tie-ins for every one of their game series that they have moving forward? So they introduced the Avengers that Square Enix is doing, and they're going to go, it comes out, and then later they go, tie-in, Gameverse, comic series for the Avengers, and they're all,
It would be cool. I don't know if I see it happening.
Okay, so do you remember a lot of people question, and we had a question written in on this, do we think that Marvel might make a, what do we want to call
Iron
it?
Man game?
Well, a Marvel Cinematic Universe style thing. So essentially a Marvel Gameverse universe where it's essentially every game they make is tied into each other in the same world, even if they can exist as separate stories. If so, it would make it more interesting that if the Gameverse thing is an idea to have all the comic book tie-ins for the games be under one umbrella, if they're in the same universe or not. And then that might imply that the Marvel games are going to indeed be in the same universe.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know if I see it happening, because I would think there'd be big time gaps in between a universe like this, right? So
whereas
2 or 3 years later, the new ones come out where the movies, it's a little more consistent, but not only that, but I feel like with games, it's easier to lose interest in this kind of thing, because it's such a time sink in a way. With a movie, you're done in less than 3 hours. With a game, it takes 15, 20, sometimes 30 hours. So you may play the first 2, then wait 3 years, and then play the second one, and then you know you're not going to have one for another 3 years, so you can't really be that excited for it. You could be, or I wouldn't be really excited for it.
Now, I get where you're going with that, but I guess that's thinking it'd be under the same umbrella. So a lot of what they do,
I would want it to be under the same umbrella.
The cinematic universe, and what I mean by same umbrella is that's kind of the idea of one developer working on it. But if you think about it this way,
I would want one developer.
If
so
they
it's consistent.
set this up really the right way, when you think about the movies, think about that. The movies are not all written by one person, filmed by one person, directed by one person.
They're not, and yet they somehow
I mean?
can capture the consistency that works pretty well throughout the universe. But I don't feel like a game could do that.
The reason I think it might be able to, and I think the reason that they're aiming, why they could be aiming for that, and I think they've been a little coy about saying anything about it, is that they want to see how likely it is that it'll work before they completely announce it. There's when Insomniac were working on Spider-Man, there is a Marvel representative that comes and checks in with the story and different things, and that's exactly what happens with the movie. There's one person who kind of controls how everything's going to tie together.
Yeah, and
if they want to do that.
I actually just saw an article. Whoopsie daisies.
So if that's going to be the case, then essentially they could have a Marvel team that comes down and looks at the games and works on how they're going to tie together and what the point of the franchise, like, how they're going to be set timeline-wise. I guess it just, to me, it lends credence to the fact that it could be possible.
And here's an article of Spider-Man PS4. Marvel tried to cut the game's biggest twist.
Really?
Yep. So
what was the game's biggest twist? Because I saw the ending from a mile away. No offense to the game, I just being honest. What is the biggest twist?
I would think that whole entire character plot device out.
What do you mean?
I think it's fair to say now. The game's been out for a while, right?
I don't want to say it because it's been out for a while.
Can I say the name of the character?
Yeah,
because it's kind of hard to talk about it.
Yeah, I know. The
one character that was not advertised could be taken out of the game completely and put something else in.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that would have been garbage. I feel like, depending on what they did,
it depends on what you meant by the twist, though. It may have been the way they wanted to set up the character in the game. But regardless, I just think that that's weird to say that Spider-Man had a big twist, because I think consistently I've seen pretty much everybody agree that if you even know anything about Spider-Man, you could say, even if you didn't, honestly, the game beats you over the head with what's going to happen. You know what I mean? There's not a twist in that game.
That's what I feel like. It'd take out half of the game, if not 75% of it.
I just feel like the wording of the article is more weird than anything. But my point being is that there could be something. I don't know. I mean, you could be right. I'd say this.
Correction. This isn't exactly about the bad guy. This is about another character.
Okay, so I'm assuming MT.
No. MT?
Yeah.
Who is MT?
We'll talk about it later. Anyway.
Here, I'll just highlight it for you and spin the laptop around.
Oh.
See, so even that is like something I don't want to have, like weird, like Marvel reps controlling everything. Like, I feel like if it wasn't done.
First of all, whatever. You know what? That's not a twist either.
I mean, that's never happened before except in like 2 series.
Yeah.
But, and I definitely didn't expect it to happen in the game, technically. But, yeah, I don't feel like it'd feel right to me. Like, it'd be like if you played a series and I say a trilogy. Yeah. And then the third one's developed by a different. It's the same game series developed under somebody else.
I didn't mean that, and I agree with you there.
So what I
mean by different studios is that Spider-Man is under Insomniac now. So Spider-Man 2 and 3 will be under Insomniac. But the way that those movies work is that I'm using the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the closest thing.
I thought you were talking about
you have different studios. So this year we have and because they started slow with the movies as well. This year you have Spider-Man, or last year you had Spider-Man. This year you get the Avengers. Next year you get a new Wolverine game or something. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, and you can use an example like Wolverine by Bungie.
Exactly.
And then Bungie is the developer of Wolverine. Yeah. I thought you were saying that it would have every single game that in a series, hypothetically, would be helmed at a different studio. That would not be good.
That would not be good at all.
Okay. That's how I was just like, no.
Yeah. Okay.
Now that I see what you mean now, I'm like, okay, have Insomniac do Spider-Man, have Bungie do Wolverine, whatever it is.
Yeah. And as they go off as individual series, they continue to make them.
Yeah. So, I know they will
any
collaborate.
Avenger game moving forward would be handled by Square Enix.
Right.
As long as Square Enix does a good job, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which
it would be hard to mess it up, I think, but it also would require a lot of communication from each studio.
Well, and to be fair, one game messing up doesn't mean the end of anything. Because do you remember how bad Iron Man 2 was in terms of throwing off the rest of the cinematic universe?
It'd be like if Avengers 1 was that bad, though, is what I'm talking about.
Well, do you mean Avengers 1 movie?
Yes. So, like, you're
okay. I guess I get what you're going to. I don't think that because we already know that the Avengers is a game being made, the games would not be building toward the Avengers like the movies were. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because
I get your reason.
Iron Man 2 and 3 were really bad movies.
Yeah, they're not really great movies. So
Iron Man 1 was pretty great though.
I don't know. We'll move on to the next thing though. Bandai Namco released a trailer teasing its previously announced Dragon Ball game, quote, Project Z action RPG. It's being developed by Dot Hack and Naruto developer CyberConnect that we just talked about in the Final Fantasy VII bit, and supposedly aiming for a 2019 release, even though it apparently doesn't have a name. I feel like the name probably gives away a little too much.
Tenkaichi Buken did it.
But here's here's the thing. I don't necessarily know how I feel with CyberConnect developing it, just because
I feel bad.
I don't mind the dot hack games. They're okay, but I would want this to be high quality.
That's what I was going to say. They're not the high quality that I'm thinking of for a Dragon Ball Z game. Now,
but they to their credit, I don't care for Naruto, but they do a good job with the Naruto fighting games.
Yeah, the what is it? Ninja Storm fighting games are fun, but I'm just saying that like there's a quality difference there between Dragon Ball Z Fighters and Naruto Storm to me. One feels much more polished and looks more polished, and the other one doesn't. And that might be because I haven't played any of the current gen Naruto games, but I've looked at videos and I'm just like,
it doesn't.
It looks the same as the PS3 game.
Yeah, and I mean,
and I played a lot of those.
Here's where I'm kind of torn on it. I think we've mentioned on a reader mail or something where people were talking about what game would you want to be made, and I've always said, and I've said it since I played them on Game Boy, the old Legacy of Goku games where you're flying around the whole world and you're landing.
I could beat the first Legacy of Goku in less than an hour.
Oh yeah, because there was so many ways to just skip around that game.
The game was just short.
Oh, it was short anyway, but you could skip around it.
If you knew the Piccolo maze in that game, you could. That was the majority game right there.
But that whole series, the Legacy of Goku that moved into Boo's Fury.
Yeah, that's the best one.
Man, I love those games, and I've always said the idea of being able to just walk around the town, turn Super Saiyan whenever you want to, it was cool. It was like, I would love for this to be in a 3D world of Dragon Ball, and I was hoping that that's what this would be, even if it's just a retelling of a story saga. We
were all hoping Xenoverse would be something similar.
Yeah, and Xenoverse wasn't bad, and they've been slowly on the upswing, right? They had Xenoverse, which was pretty all right.
Really good.
Yeah, and then you have Dragon Ball FighterZ. They've been on an upswing with the Dragon Ball gaming thing, and it's kind of existed ever since Dragon Ball Super kind of came back out. And oh Lord, I'm bad with names today for some reason. I don't know why I can't think of the creator of Dragon Ball Z.
Akira Toriyama.
Thank you. Now that he's back involved with it, it almost seems like the games have shot up in quality as well. What's what I'm talking about? Him being involved with Super.
Gotcha.
That seemed to have spurred all these great Dragon Ball games coming.
I thought you were talking about now that Super's done and he's involved with something else with them. I'm like, wait.
I don't know if he was involved with the games, though. I think Xenoverse, it's possible, because the Xenoverse games are apparently supposed to not necessarily not be canon. I could be misspeaking.
It's in the in-between from like what the old movies used to be considered, because the old movies used to, there was no definitive answer on canon back then when they came out.
And because it ties into the whole multiverse thing that Super introduced,
Yeah, so
and moving around through time in different universes
still
and
need to finish that series. But let's continue on to the news.
All right, next thing up, PS Plus games for February were revealed alongside some improvements to the service as we all get changes going forward in that. This is the last month that PS3 and Vita titles will be given on the service, though access to previously redeemed games for the systems will continue to be available as long as you hold your subscription. Same old as it's always been. Also, Plus users will have their cloud storage increased from 10 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes. And the games for the month are as follows: Hitman, the complete first season for PS4, For Honor for PS4, Dive Kick for PS3 and Vita cross-buy, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. Yeah, boy, what a great PS3 ending game. Gunhouse for PS Vita and PS4, and Rogue Aces for PS Vita and PS4
as
well.
All the Vita games suck.
Too bad that they didn't even at least try and put one of the AAA Vita games that just didn't make it on the service.
You could have put Persona 4.
World Den made a really good point about that.
No, I know he did. It's one of the best-selling video games. Well, guess what? The Vita's dead.
But it still sells. It doesn't matter if the Vita's dead,
It can still... This could be the hurrah. I know from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense,
but Sony would have had to pay a buttload of money for it.
I mean, they made a buttload of money on it, so why not give some back to Atlas and just be like, here you go?
Well, I mean, Atlas made the money on it, realistically. They just made percentages off. But I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, it was still lucrative for Sony.
Yeah, I think that it should have been something big, though. Obviously, Persona 4 Golden being... if not the number one selling Vita games currently.
I was almost surprised by Metal Gear Solid 4. When I saw it, I was like, I don't know why. I've always wondered why that game hadn't been added to the service yet. But
Konami said no.
I don't know. It's a really weird in-between, but there you go. If you got PlayStation Plus, there goes your free games. And I'm actually impressed with For Honor being on there because I've been wanting to try it, but I didn't want to pay it.
That game was terrible.
I didn't play it yet. I haven't played it at all.
$20 or $30 for that game when it was on sale last year, and I played it and it was terrible.
Okay,
no fun.
I mean,
it's one of those games that if you don't buy complete, it's just not fun because you're limited to stuff you could do. You're limited to the things you could play. And that's exactly what this is.
And hold on, isn't it Ubisoft?
Yes. So this is going to be like.
So they went almost a completely different way. Well, I'm not going to say completely different way. I'm trying to think of how to word this because Rainbow Six.
Nope, Rainbow Six is the same way. Rainbow Six, you have the starter pack.
Well, of course, but how much does it really segregate you versus? Because obviously in a game like Rainbow Six, your matchmaking is. And I would imagine the same in this, right? Your matchmaking would be limited to people who are with you.
I don't think it did that in Rainbow Six. Did it?
Yeah, it should.
No, I think you could still play against all operators in Rainbow Six with just the starter.
Well, that's even better. So that you can play with the people who have it, but it doesn't matter because it just means that you don't have the operators. That's fine.
So like you're paying $15 for a Rainbow Six game with 4 characters in it, where you're playing with somebody who has.
But it was at launch anyway. You know what I mean?
Right. But I'm just saying now.
Yeah.
So like now you're gonna
enough.
hop into this, and you're gonna have everybody's gonna have their warrior unlocked or whoever they want to play as with all the other stuff they have, and it's not necessarily a. It's just it's one of those things that's like you're gonna have to spend money on this free game to get the stuff you want out of the game. So I don't agree that it should be on here.
Now you say that like absolutely. Is it a game like I'm trying to think of a good example?
Rainbow Six. Say you pick up Rainbow Six for $15.
I can't. I don't have enough example of experience with Rainbow Six, so I'm gonna go with a different game that I have a little more of an understanding for, and then you can see how close of it. Because I don't know if you played it at all, but you can see how analogous it is to Rainbow Six, and tell me. Mag on PS3.
Nope.
Was a game where you actually got leveled as you played. So it didn't matter if you even bought it later. If you bought it way later and started trying to play while the servers are still up, everybody else was out leveled and actually had better gear than you. They could kill you quicker. They could withstand more shots.
BioShock 2.
It was a bad multiplayer. It was a cool idea with a bad design because if you bought the game later, you literally just couldn't do it. It'd take you hours of luck and just crazy amounts of skill.
It's not like that. But what it is like is that you download this free game and you may go watch a video or something, or you may see a character. You're like, I want to play as him. And then you have to spend $8 to $10 to $12 to $20 to unlock that character.
I guess I'm still with you. It's just that I guess in my mind, I still fall back to the idea that the game was that price at launch or whatever, and you only have those characters anyway. Everything else, and we had a conversation about DLC in general actually recently. In competitive games, it's a little different because if you don't have DLC like that, the game dies very quickly. People almost
it's not a
need
disagreement.
some form.
It's not a disagreement with the DLC. What I feel should be the most morally and the most acceptable stance would be when these games come out a year and a half later with a $60, whatever it's going to be called, the complete collection.
Sure.
Like Rainbow Six did. The base game should be free to play. Because you're getting, if you go buy, when you bought that game, how much did you pay?
Bought what?
The base Rainbow Six game, just like last year.
I don't know because I returned it immediately.
It was $20. I remember.
I don't remember.
When you bought that game, you had no operators unlocked. You couldn't unlock all the operators without paying for them. And the system in that game works that if you play, obviously, if you play enough, you're going to be able to unlock them. That will take you years.
Forever. Yeah, no, and that we were talking about that in the Discord about. And that one's a little different. Like I say, it's a competitive game, so it is harder to kind of figure that out because, honestly, if you play a competitive game, they're repetitive anyway. It's kind of the point of a competitive game like that. They're meant to be twitch-based, repetitious gameplay.
Not everybody jumps into a game wanting to do that, which I understand, or I would say Rainbow Six is the wrong game to play.
If you want to jump in randomly.
If you want to jump in randomly, like without intentions of learning the game or being competitive in the game, or
I would even say the learning curve of that game is enough where you can't just jump into that game. It's not.
You can. I've seen people just jump in to try to play team,
but you're not going to do well at all.
You're not going to have fun.
Yeah, you'll die very quickly. It's not like Call of Duty where you can fake it till you make it and die a whole lot, but still have fun.
But the thing is that base game that you had, this was before season 2 or whatever.
I don't remember
what it was.
I didn't enjoy it. So
do you remember when you traded it in? Like a week later, it went to $60.
I just returned it, so I don't know. Yeah. I didn't even trade it in. I remember that it randomly price jumped again.
It price jumped back up to either $50 or $60.
But yeah.
So, and that was during a time in which everybody was jumping back in. So that's what they
I
did.
bought it used just so we can clarify.
Yeah, he bought it used at GameStop,
and I just returned it used.
So he got to return it. Within the 7 days.
Did the used price also shoot up?
No, the used price shop's like $50. And then the new one was $60. Wow. And this is for a game that was 3 years old at that point.
And still the base game?
Well, I'm talking about what you had was $50, and it was the base game. The pack or whatever it was that released that had all the stuff in it was $60.
Okay, well, that's reasonable. That's dumb that the used game rose its price as well if that happened.
I mean, it's
because that's really stupid.
It's the way that the demand worked. I just think that like Destiny 1, like Destiny 2 should be free, and then all the DLC packs cost money. In Destiny 2 right now, if you go wherever to buy it, like,
which essentially they did for a short period. So.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true, but like if you go to GameStop and buy that game, you can only get to level 20. I think it's like your max light level's 300, I think, or 200 something. Yeah. It should just be free. Like all these kind of games should, like the year and a half, 2 years later at mark, you should be making your money off DLCs and continuous players.
And see, I essentially agree with you, because what would be the difference for Destiny's business model, since we kind of moved into that, at least specifically a game like Destiny, which is, as we say, and you realistically you see this, we've constantly gone back and forth, and I think we're kind of in the middle ground of Destiny is a form of an MMO, even if it changes a lot of things.
It fits into the, I wouldn't say it is an MMO, but it's the like there's no other term to describe it.
It's really the closest thing you could group it into.
Yeah.
So if you go into that and you think about what that is, other MMOs are all free for their base game, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can go download World of Warcraft right now.
Yeah, and play till level 20 for free or something like that.
I think it's higher than that. I think it's 90.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Regardless, it may be level 40. That sounds right.
That might be right.
That sounds right. But regardless, you can play for a small stint free, and then essentially what you do after that is, if you want to keep playing, you just not even if you want to keep playing. I think the game lets you log in. You just can't do anything.
Oh no, it is only level 20.
Okay, level 20. So anyway, these are all games that give you a way to experience the game to know you'll like it without buying it as an MMO. Destiny really should do the same, because what would be the downside for it? They could still offer they could still do it in a way where you buy the base game with all the DLC like they already do.
The thing though is that how much did Forsaken cost when it came out?
40.
How much do you think that then at that point Warmind and Curse of Osiris was worth? About $10 a piece.
Yeah.
$60.
Yeah. Bam. You make your 60. That's what I was saying. That's essentially the same thing.
We're not saying this makes sense from a business perspective. I'm talking about from a consumer who plays these kind of games. I'd like to see this what is it called when it's games as a service. I want to see this games as a service model change to be more user friendly, because when it becomes more user friendly, you have a higher ability to retain these people who want to play.
Well, see, I was about to say, you said it may not be a good business decision, but I think honestly, when you start talking about it in that sense, you end up with the idea that it would eventually make it a better business decision. And I think that's why you see so many businesses do it, right? It gets you into the door of the game, and then as long as you get to try the game, the chances of you trying it, discovering that you really like it, and then wanting to spend more money on it goes way up than if you have a cost barrier entry anyway.
It's true. So games like Destiny 2, The Division, For Honor, Rainbow Six, all these base games should be free.
From what we've seen from Destiny, just to go towards your point before you finish, is that their little free stint on PC and on PS4 did
PC.
wonders for them.
Yeah, twice on PC if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It was before PS Plus, and then back again in like last November,
something like that. Yeah,
or October. So yeah, that's how I feel during this. So I think the only game on here that it has any form for me or any excitement would be Hitman, the complete collection, and if you have a PS3, most certainly pick up Metal Gear Solid 4, because that game, despite having the most cutscenes out of any Metal Gear Solid game in the series,
it's so good.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and roll through. Speaking of games of service, Brett.
Yep, the Divisions 2s. I'm telling you, I set this list up for segues out the butthole.
I mean, you kind of didn't, but because I see it one right here.
Okay, well then, I'm so sorry. Anyway, the Division 2 is private beta exclusive to those who pre-ordered the game. Will be going live February 7th, so I think that's actually...
It would be next.
Is it a Friday?
No, it'll be next.
It's a Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
Okay, so
Wednesday.
So from Thursday through Sunday, you can play the game if you pre-ordered it. Right now, there's been no public beta mentioned, so it may be the only chance you get to play the game beforehand if you're curious about it. So I might even go as to say, I know some people don't like doing this, but as long as there's retailers who let you do this, next time, if you go to GameStop at any point,
you don't even have to do all that. Just do Amazon.
Well, the reason I say that is, do you get the code and then can you cancel it if you decide you don't like it?
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't know these things. That's what I'm saying.
I don't remember, and I've done this only once with Nier, but I don't remember if Amazon charges you then or when it ships. I'm 99.999% sure it charges you when it ships.
Probably.
So,
but as long as you can still cancel it, then yeah, whatever way you do, you wouldn't want to do it through the PlayStation Store because they do force you to pay at the time of.
Yes.
But outside of that, if you're curious about the game because you didn't play the Division 1 or because you played the Division 1 and you're kind of in between, it might be worth pre-ordering it just to try and get in on this. Though there is a free thing where you can, or there's a thing where you can go and try and get into it. I can't remember what it was as a website. I didn't mark it on here because it's very limited, and I think the shutdown for it closes on Tuesday.
Yeah, so, I think if you're going to use Amazon like that, I use Amazon a lot. I think that it's fair in a way because you're essentially trying out the game to know if you're going to want to keep with the purchase. Now, for those that just want to go to abuse it, that's another story. Can't really police that without ruining it for everybody. But
well, and I also see the devil's advocate side of, while some people might be like, well, why wouldn't they just do an open beta? Well, when you think open betas, you can't control the amount of people who are going to come in. You don't know anything.
Well, these private betas are also like heavily marketed for streamers.
I know.
And it's really annoying.
And on that side, I am like, it just seems like it's a play for money. But even then, honestly, I get the idea of, well, if you've already pre-ordered the game, you at least had the intent to try and buy it. So we're going to give you the go-ahead to try the game out, because then if you don't like it and you back out, that's fine, but you had the intent. Whereas otherwise, yeah, you can get people who might or might not buy the game trying to play the game, but you also might get a lot of people who have no care in the world. They just want to play it so they can go and talk about how bad it is, and then they're just wasting valuable server space, you know what I mean, for a beta. And I imagine it's really hard to really try and figure out how much of a pre-order population is going to actually play your beta so that you can try and have the correct server space for it.
Which is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's rough. We saw it hit Anthem last weekend, so
that's exactly why I said that. Circling all the way back to Dragon Ball Z because you segue so well.
Yep. Well, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I segued bad. My bad. Dragon Ball FighterZ Season 2 started this past week and brings with it a number of changes, from small tweaks to buffing and nerfing different moves and mechanics. The new season brings with it new characters as well, so if you're taking a break from the game, or if you've not picked it up yet, maybe a good time for you to do so. The game has done very well in the fighting game community, so I'm assuming if you like fighting games, you've probably already done it, but if you like Dragon Ball Z, it's also a very good title for that. Like I said, even though I didn't necessarily love the take on the story mode, it was still really fun, and it's a gorgeous game. Next up, the Ghost Survivors DLC that we talked about for Resident Evil 2's remake last episode has been dated for February 15th. So the free content will allow players to play the game using the gun shop owner, the mayor's daughter, and the soldier. And see their stories through, since they don't make it out in the storyline. I think it's a cool idea for free DLC for something like this. And it's a kind of a goodwill move. You know what I mean? The game has been doing really well. It outperformed Resident Evil 7, which was already a great performer.
Yeah, I really want to pick this game up when I'm done with Kingdom Hearts. If not, just to play through it once and then just to start speedrunning it. I've been getting into really trying to speedrun games lately, and that's one game that is, of course, it works really well for those. Yeah,
speedrunner savvy. On the heels of many, including us, Saul and I, and many in our Discord, speculating that Death Stranding will release this year, Kojima has taken to Twitter to respond to a joking tweet made to him where someone asked if they could play Death Stranding now, and he says, quote, "It'll take a while," end quote. There's a little bit more. He's talking about enjoying the movie because it had something to do with Mads Mikkelsen. What I find interesting about this...
He's too cryptic of a dude to make anything of this. What's the problem?
Exactly. And the bigger thing is, he says it'll take a while. Well, we just got into February. That does not rule out 2019 at all. From all of the guesses that we've been doing, and I think most people who are obviously, can look and try and be analytical to this, there's not a reason why any reasonable person would look and go, well, Death Stranding is going to be out in April. No. If Death Stranding was going to be out...
like June, July, August, later on the year.
Honestly, when I'm thinking about how much the third-party publishers have put out this, so Anthem is a game that any other time I would have expected, and originally it was intended to be a fall release, but it moved, right? We're seeing the third-party games kind of hit the beginning of this year. Kingdom Hearts 3 was Square Enix's third-party big game. They hit early in the year instead of late in the year.
Right.
Anthem is doing it. Metro's doing it. I mean, all these big games. Microsoft is even releasing Crackdown in a early position, which has normally been this area of the year, the first quarter, has normally been something that Sony has really championed. And then smaller games, like AA games. So I find it interesting that we're seeing this. Honestly, I still think that there's a high chance that Death Stranding comes out as a fall release, maybe even like a holiday title, somewhere in the September through November range, possibly. So,
Man, just to take a little segue, did you hear that apparently Sony's not having PSX this year at all?
Did they already confirm that?
I don't know. Our good boy Ryan on Twitter was talking about it. And,
yeah.
I don't know if he was joking or not, but I couldn't find a source for it, so I got kind of scared. But it was early in the day, and I was also halfway asleep. So, I don't know, but I'm kind of sad that if that's true. Nope.
I don't know. I think he's probably saying that he feels like it's unlikely. Ryan, you can confirm with us if we don't end up finding anything about it. I feel like it'd be really weird of Sony to go ahead and confirm that in my opinion, realistically. But more so because of all the signs that seem to be pointing towards the PS5. I almost feel like you'd want to make sure you had good, I'm not going to say PR necessarily. I'm trying to think of how to say this, but you'd want goodwill of your consumers in general. And one of the things that people like about PSX, and you have this hit and miss side, right? You have that group of people who are saying that, I'm trying to think of the way to word this. You have the group of people who are mad that they don't essentially get all these great reveals at PSX. If they decided to, like, PSX 2017 was a very...
It was early. I completely messed up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's PSX SEA. Is the only event Sony will be at holding in 2019. So yeah, that's right. With the lack of
so that'd be lack of E3.
E3.
Now, don't get me wrong.
Which we already knew.
And I mean, Ryan, I don't know what your sources were on that. I think that's reasonable, obviously. Now, really what he's getting at with that is the fact that if that's true, then that rules out Gamescom, that rules out Paris Games Week, that rules out TGS. That's a ton. That's, you think about that. See,
yeah, I'm not too sure. So I don't want to put Ryan, I don't want to say his tweets out of context or anything. So sorry, Ryan.
And of course we don't know who the source is on something like that. So I mean, that's just essentially rumor for us.
I feel like he knows.
I'm not saying he doesn't.
No, I'll say he has his sources. He's not going to tell nobody. He's a sneaky boy.
We'll see. But I mean, we'll see. It's, to be fair, I didn't think that they were going to put Death Stranding's release date out during a conference. I thought that would have been something that, like I said, I think we've seen them adapt to giving Game Informer a cover story, and then giving them also the release date and all that information alongside the month-long, coverage. So.
Sorry,
we may see that with Death Stranding, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Kojima did not want that for Death Stranding, because he doesn't want somebody to get a month-long different footage and stuff for Death Stranding. He wants it to be as enigmatic as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, makes sense.
Anyway, another tease from people involved with big names or with big games comes from The Last of Us composer, and where he told a crowd at a recent live concert that the game is, quote, coming very soon. I don't know about that one.
Sorry if I keep sniffling in my nose.
Nah, it's fine. So we love you anyway, buddy. I don't really know about this one.
I don't think it is.
I have been so on the fence as to whether we'll see The Last of Us this year.
Listen, I have learned to not trust anybody that is not a developer. If it is an artist, a composer, whoever it is, and they're like, yeah, it's coming here like real soon. It's like, I've never once seen that true. Ever.
Well, and the other side of that is everybody seems to have a massively different idea of a definition, I guess is what I'd say, of something like very soon. Well, what is very soon to you?
Yeah, very soon is like
soon
early
in a month or two?
20 for some people.
Or is very soon, early 2020, or is it,
maybe very soon comparative to when the last game came out. So like what?
Yeah, it's been
5 years.
Yeah.
So like very soon is only a year and a half. Like we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't trust those sources. And this doesn't mean to sound mean, but I really don't think they would give a composer the release date.
Well, I think the idea behind that for people, and I do get your point.
There's too many people on a team that like made this game. Like if you think of all the composers, everybody that made this game, I don't think they gave anybody the release date. But when it's too risky.
When you think, I think obviously some people have to know. Has to.
Some people, yes,
but
not all.
Even then, I think what some of this is him inferring that since his work with the game is done, most likely, that's what's going on.
And yeah, composing work takes a long time, but just because the work is complete.
And you got to think about it this way. The composing goes on with them seeing the scenes and knowing how they want to put the music in to accent the scenes.
Which also...
it makes you think that he may be seeing the game in a polished form and go, well, yeah, it's close because I'm done with it now and we saw this, but...
I watched the behind the scenes of a game and they were actually doing the motion actors who were doing the acting for the music. And what game was that? Where it wasn't even complete footage of the game they were watching. They were watching the motion actors. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Nolan North, but that doesn't sound right at all.
Troy, if you're talking about at one point, there was a nice, and I actually love this, there was a little featurette they did that had obviously Troy Baker and the actress for, and I can't remember her name, because in my mind, I'm getting conflated with Nadine. But the Firefly leader in The Last of Us.
Oh, yeah, they do look kind of similar, don't they?
Yeah. Anyway, when you think about that, what they're doing, there's a scene where, and this is what I think you may be talking about, where they're making a musical out of the ending.
Yeah,
of the
that's
game.
what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah, and I thought that was cool. But, I mean, I get...
So it's kind of different. Marlene.
Yeah, Marlene.
Close names.
Yeah, thank you. Marlene. So I don't know. That's an interesting point. I don't necessarily know that I'd believe it either, but regardless, it's interesting to hear somebody even say something like that. It's more fun than anything because you start to think like, would Sony just slay the end of this year with Death Stranding, The Last of Us, and then somehow magically just decide to tack on and whip out, Ghost of Tsushima?
I could totally see Nadine being Marlene being a more older post-apocalyptic version of Nadine.
Of Nadine? It's Nadine's daughter.
Nadine.
Bam, tie-in.
Nadine's mother?
What? Oh, yeah. No, Marlene is Nadine's...
You said Nadine's daughter.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make sense.
What? This is in the future. This is like 2040.
Uncharted?
No. The Last of Us is. So Marlene would be Nadine's daughter.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Ha, saw.
Dang.
Anyway, look, last thing we're going to do to close out this long-winded news now is with their latest game, Detroit Become Human, being a huge success, closing in on almost 3 million copies now for them, definitely in this time period. Quantic Dream announced that the Chinese company NetEase, same company that invested into Bungie, little tidbit, had taken a minority stock in their studio and announced plans for their next game to be moving away from Sony as a publisher and instead going multi-platform while they expand their team upwards from about 200 where they've been at for a good while to 300. I'm very curious about this for two reasons. The main thing is it makes me wonder if Sony had the opportunity to invest and didn't, if Quantic Dream even wanted to be bought or didn't.
I'm sure they did, honestly, like when you think about it. And I would bet that NetEase, of course, had the money.
Well, this is why I say NetEase didn't buy them, though. They just bought in a stock thing.
Yeah,
they still
right.
remain independent.
Well, they technically own a share of them.
Exactly. But they're not owned regardless. You know what I mean? Essentially, they act in the role of as an investor and potentially a publisher at this point.
Yeah.
Now, or at least gives them the ability to do like Bungie's doing and self-publish. You know what I mean?
Right. So
that's one thing that makes sense with the upcoming gaming market where you're seeing more people start to take over the role of self-publishing if they have the funds to do so, because it does take funds.
Oh, it takes a lot of funds.
So when you put that alongside the fact that some independent studios really have offered or been offered, from everything I've been able to see, I'm pretty sure Sony has offered to buy Insomniac and had price just said no. And some of it comes down to this, and we talked about this in Discord recently as well. I think the number one thing that I can really understand about independent studios wanting to remain independent, and it's funny that it ties into our Kojima topic last week, right, is the fact that when you think about it, independent studios, it's not even about whether or not they have creative control. It's about the fact that the ability for them for their studio to remain open for the foreseeable future is on the whim of Sony and how well their games are doing, right? Let's just say that Quantic Dream did get bought by Sony, right? And Sony funded a game and it ended up being more or less a commercial and critical dud, kind of like Beyond Two Souls was.
Oh, yeah.
So when you think about it like that, if, let's just say they do 2 of those games in a row, and it's just unfortunate that it came down to that way, but it did. Sony can decide to pull the plug, and that's the end of Quantic Dream as a studio. Whereas if Quantic Dream is still an independent, Sony just goes, well, we don't want to work with you anymore. We're done. Oh, well.
Ties.
But they can still go on and make games however they please. And I think some of it comes down to a legacy thing where people are like, well, even if this would be a good idea, we never want to face the day where Quantic Dream might get closed because it's my legacy. And I want Quantic Dream to live on past me and continue to be an independent studio and make great games, even with me being away from it. I think there's a lot of pride in creation in something like that, and I could see why they may not have wanted to go it. But I do consider this to be, I'm not going to call it a major loss or blow to Sony necessarily, though I could see how some people may view it as that who are Sony fans, or people who are Microsoft fans trying to use that as ammunition. Or I'm not going to say fans because that's a little, fanboys, people who are trying to slander Sony and talk bad about them. I could see people who are Microsoft fans who are looking to do that, using this as ammunition against Sony, saying we all lost another great studio. When realistically, I think the biggest thing you can say is that regardless of even if Beyond was a flop in a lot of ways, I think that Heavy Rain, Beyond, and obviously Detroit have been great technical showpieces that were probably only capable due to a large amount of funding from Sony, good creative control, and the fact that they are able to optimize for one console. I think that the fact that they're losing that talent that's proven themselves time and again to be able to be a great technical showpiece is a little bit of a blow. Not a huge blow or anything like that, but it's a little bit. It's a loss, obviously.
Well, it depends on who you ask now about a substantial loss. We kind of talked about it though.
See, I'm not going to say substantial, but it's a loss nonetheless.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about last week with Brian Deckard, who was seemingly just a voice actor. Now he's like a Twitch streamer because of that game.
Yeah.
And it's massive with how he's risen up from the ranks and how this game's accumulated. Or keep saying this game. Detroit has accumulated so many fans that it's just based off him.
Yeah,
more than anything else in the world. No, not off Kara or Marcus. Him alone.
Though the game owes its creation in general from Kara Tech Demo.
Technically, yeah.
It's funny how that works
2012?
No, it was before Beyond, so it was like 2009, 10.
Dang.
It's a good tech demo. Because look, what I'm getting at is that obviously Sony's not losing access to the games. If they go multi-platform, the games will still be on Sony. Do you think they will be as optimized and as crazy looking as something like Detroit, where they actually talked about not even having the room to squeeze in photo mode because of the fact that they, optimization wise, they couldn't?
That's hard to say. I would say no.
When's the last time you saw a third party game really do that? Some people talk about the importance of exclusives, as we have, and some people talk about the unimportance of exclusives. But I think the number one thing about exclusives is it guarantees that you have one unified hardware system that you're making for, at least in the case of PS4, then you have to deal with just a PS4 and a PS4 Pro, which is just enhanced versions of the same hardware.
Right.
But essentially, you get to create for one chipset and one idea and one great, so you're optimizing very tightly, and then of course you have the backing of the studio who's doing this as a first party game, or at least as an exclusive, who wants to see this game be a technical showpiece, so they want to give you the time and energy needed to do that may not exist in the aspect of a third party game. I'm not saying that Red Dead wasn't beautiful in a lot of ways, but Red Dead does not necessarily hold a candle to some other games. I mean, Red Dead won't look at anything, and I know it's coming out later, but Red Dead won't hold a candle to Death Stranding or to Last of Us 2 when it comes out.
Right.
I would even go as far as to argue that they're different games, so I'm not saying this from a scale perspective, but Red Dead 2 didn't even quite look as good as The Order, but The Order's a way different type of game. But all I'm getting at
that's like
is
apples and oranges.
When you're dealing with exclusive games like that, even a studio like Ready at Dawn, they're able to do a lot with the fact that they're going towards one console. And I think, if anything, they just act
makes
as
it
great,
easier in a way for them.
Exclusives are important. Yeah, it does to an extent. But exclusives, and why I think that this is a little bit of a loss, and at least in terms of the technical side, is they're going to lose that flair because of the fact that exclusives act as to make games even better than they otherwise would have been. Detroit could have been a multi-platform game. It probably wouldn't have been as polished as it was.
No, and it honestly,
and that's unfortunate, but it's true to an extent. I mean, I can't think of a third party, and you could say it may just even be because third party developers are lazy, or that they don't have the right tool sets, or they don't have the backing support like Sony does with their ICE team that goes through and supports the games from all the developers to make sure they're cutting edge technology wise. Who knows what the reason is, but I mean, regardless, I can't think of AAA games, even Kingdom Hearts 3, for as beautiful as it is, and it really is a great looking game. It is way better looking than Final Fantasy 15. It's
without a doubt
insanity. But Kingdom Hearts 3 is, again, not going to hold a candle to something like The Last of Us, just because it's not meant to. It's not what those games are for.
Even Final Fantasy 15 is kind of rough too, because it came out 2 years ago.
Yeah, sure, and that's what I mean. Time is obviously part of it, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We ended up on this a little longer than I meant to, but you have any last thoughts about that?
No.
Okay. Well, Saul, the main topic was your idea, so let's roll into it and let's see what you think about it and what you wanted to talk about with it.
So, for those that don't know, pretty big news for one of the most, if not the most, wanted feature for the PS5. Mark Cerny, CEO of what is it? It's the acronym that always throws me off.
What? The CEO?
I'm not CEO, but the president of Sony SIE.
Okay, yeah, Sony Interactive Entertainment. Yeah.
And he has suggested...
I don't know if that's what he is, to be fair, but I mean, he's just essentially...
I'm pretty sure he is.
He obviously... I mean, he's involved with Sony very heavily, but I don't really... All that matters to me is that Mark Cerny, in general...
He filed a patent. Or he's...
I'm just saying he's a smart man and that he has been working with Sony since PS4 and then on PS4 Pro, and now it looks like seemingly on PS5, so...
It's rumored, heavily rumored, mainly backed by patent files, that there has been a patent filed through Sony from him for what looks to be like a brand new type of emulation. And what I mean by that is that it looks like the PS5 will have multiple processors, and each one is basically running a spoof of each of the older systems. So there's a chart that you guys can find online, and I'll try to link it in the description below if I remember when I do timestamps. But it's almost like backwards compatibility could very well be a real thing, and that it's doing it in a very, I don't want to say odd way, because emulation is always best based off of some kind of spoofing of files, some kind of spoofing of hardware in a way.
Well, yeah, realistically, the idea behind, for people who don't know, the idea behind emulation is that it requires more power than you originally had to be able to make your existing hardware mimic what another hardware is doing.
And this is going to be the first console ever to mimic this many consoles. Basically, it's going to be able to spoof its processor into being an older processor. Is what all of these files.
Yeah, I mean, so, and I like that you use the word console, because obviously, if you give PC enough time, it acts as a single console or
PC
a single
already,
platform.
Yeah, PC
that
can already do that now.
Yeah,
like currently, right now, as you listen to this, you could do GameCube, PlayStation, you can do everything.
Exactly.
So this is the first console that has ever been able to do something like this. And the Xbox One.
Well, now when you say this, what do you mean in terms of just the sheer number of consoles? Saying that it's even doing that, because
the Xbox can do two.
Yeah,
the 360 and the original Xbox.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's mimicking too, but I guess you could say
I'm talking about terms of backwards compatibility.
Okay, yeah, I've got you, because I would argue that obviously the original model PS3 was the first console to be able to do.
I'm not saying first console
moving forward. I got you.
That still did two though. This is doing.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay,
I got you. I mean,
this is doing three.
Roll forward.
Yeah.
Well, really, if it'd be doing four. Right,
technically,
so it'd be doing PS1. That's
PS1.
I don't have the patent in front of me, so I'm not sure what it's saying. But I would assume, and I did hear about it. I would assume it's PS1 through PS4.
Yeah.
So if it's doing that, it's doing four consoles that don't. Because part of the reason that you got to be careful with that is the Xbox One X is not a new console. It's just a
it also
iteration
has Xbox
of the
360 parts in
one.
it, which use. I was talking about just the Xbox
One,
general.
the original, yeah. But the Xbox One X is part of that. But what I was going to get is that as far as Microsoft have said, and we don't know if that's true moving forward with their next console, really, since the X ended up being different than they kept saying it was going to be. It's still interesting to see if Microsoft is going to keep that forward compatibility thing where all games that release, even on the next, let's call it the Xbox 2 for, namesake. Let's call it Xbox 2. Every game that releases for the Xbox 2 will still release brand new in package and be playable on Xbox One, Xbox One X, and Xbox 2.
Is what it sounds like they're going with.
That's what they've constantly talked about, whereas Sony would not be doing that. So this would be true backwards compatibility.
Yeah, this would be forward thinking for the past, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Going forward, everything you could play on the past is on this machine. For Sony, except handhelds, obviously.
Now, here's where the interesting spot with that would be. Do you feel like it would, because, I mean, like you're saying, essentially it's for consoles, but do you feel like games that are emulated for PS4 would also be emulated with their Pro enhancements? That would be very interesting. I
think so.
But you think about this, because when you're and it may not have
I guess
to be
it would based on the speed of the processor,
and it wouldn't even necessarily have to be emulated, right? Because one of the things is that the PS5 should be moving forward on essentially the same architecture, the x86 platform that we see the Xbox One use, the PlayStation 4 use, and PC use. If you think about that, it may not, I mean, I guess it may be emulation, but it won't be as hard as trying to mimic the cell, which is an entirely different, when you're trying to mimic something like the PS3 cell architecture, what you're essentially doing is having something try and mimic an entirely different architecture. I mean, it's not even in the same ballhouse of what it is, whereas trying to emulate different specs and whatnot, and I mean, you can still call it hardware because it's like you're trying to emulate different chipsets on the same architecture.
I got him confused with
Shuhei.
Yes. I
thought so when you said it that way.
I do
because I was like, I know
how.
that he's employed by Sony.
I don't know. He's the head. He's the lead system architect of the PS4.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got him confused. I just listen. I
chalk it up to sickness.
I think I said earlier that like I'm a little foggy headed right now because of my cold/flu, whatever I have.
Whatever excuse you need, Saul.
Yeah. So there's a flow chart / graph that is revealing some of the stuff about this in the patent file. And what it looks like is that there's basically multiple processors in this system. And it looks like they're going to communicate with each other depending on the actions that they take. So I think that's kind of interesting to have this multiple processors because it's not.
What's this you got?
You can find it on Push Square. I'm on Game Tyrant right now looking at the flow chart. For those that are listening, feel free to look it up itself. What I can't find a definite answer for, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to look today since I had to work, and I can't really find one now, is that I can't tell if this is spoofing multiple processors or if this is running multiple processors.
Because that's what I was about to say. If it's doing it with multiple processors, then it's not even necessarily emulating at that point. I mean, I guess in some sense it is. This is getting into a lot of tech jargon.
Yeah,
for people who don't really care about that.
It's not emulation. It's like it's just backwards compatibility.
Yeah, it's more akin to what you saw from the PS3 launch model that had the PS2 chipset in it, and it didn't emulate. It just ran the disc from the PS2 chipset.
Right, and see, this is the thing with Push Square is that I'm not entirely too sure, but on this article. It says, quote, the technical side of this supposed backwards compatibility system sounds pretty crazy. Essentially, it allows the machine, the PS5 in this case, to mimic the behavior of previous consoles using multiple processors. In other words, when an old game is booted up, the PS5 tricks the software into thinking that it is running its original device. Again, it sounds rather ambitious, end quote. So
I get what they're saying, but when you actually go to look at this, it does look like it's saying that it says spoofed, right? It actually says return spoofed processor ID in this flowchart.
Right. So I'm
what's interesting is I'm almost wondering if they have programmed processor IDs, because that's what they're using here. Is the word processor ID. It says, the flowchart acts as this. It begins the processor ID request from application. So it tries to ask what ID that you need processor wise. It goes down and it says, is it a legacy application? If it's yes, then it goes down and it says return spoofed processor ID. So it needs to know what that processor ID is. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a different processor as much as it could be processor states that they're doing, right?
Well, this is using the software testing patent. This is using CPUs plural.
So they could have a secondary CPU that acts as all three of the original consoles.
That doesn't sound possible, does it?
Yeah, PS2 and PS1 are easy to emulate now.
PS4 included, unless you're talking about one processor, PS5 and PS4.
Well, yeah, because it wouldn't need to as hard because it's a similar architecture, right? The ones that are going to be harder, as we even see with PS3,
the older
still,
ones. Yeah,
we have some PS3 games emulatable right now on PC.
It's still rough. You have to have a top of the line gaming PC to be able to run Demon Souls. Almost 10-year-old game at this.
Yeah,
or it is older than 10 years old.
From what I've seen, I think it's easier to emulate the Wii U than it is PS3.
Absolutely, dude.
So that's what I mean.
Absolutely. People have set up, and I don't know how they did this and or like what they did, but they've set up their Vive to work with Wii motion controls.
That's cool. But I guess the idea behind this is, we can talk about the processor and how it's doing it all day, but that's really a lot of tech talk that some people may not like, and then some of it we just don't understand. I'm not going to act like we're some kind of ultimate knowledge on these things, but we understand some of these things. Boy, we're coming up right on the 10-year anniversary.
I just remarked that it's 10 years old, and it's 3 days from now. So one day after the recording of this video, Demon Souls will have been 10 years old.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm getting a lot of solid information just looking into this.
Well, and it's a patent, right? A patent doesn't mean that it's anything that's currently working necessarily. We don't know.
It is they're patenting the idea of the way that they want to do backwards compatibility. But it shows you that they're taking the time out to file and pay for this patent. Something very well could be behind this, but that goes to be untrue with 90%. By the way, did you know that 98% of statistics are made up on spot? But this goes for 90% of like all video game patents. You hear about a patent happening, you never see the light of day.
Yeah, a great example from PlayStation alone is when they patented, well before the Switch even released, they patented something that's essentially a PlayStation handheld that's akin to what the Switch is.
This article is already trash on this website. They're saying that it's going to support 8K games.
Whatever. That's a different ball game. But look, I guess what we can move into now is the idea behind it. You know, we've talked on this show, and I know a lot of people have talked in our Discord, and a lot of people have talked in general ever since Xbox was able to come out on E3 stage and say that they can emulate Xbox 360 with select titles, right? And then we've seen that expanded into enhanced backwards compatibility with the One X, where they can go back through and make older games run in 4K and stuff like that. But essentially, this entire generation has had the spell. The start of the generation, none of the consoles had backwards compatibility because of how hard it was apparently to do. But Microsoft looked forward and tried doing it, and it was easier to emulate 360 than PS3. They were also they had enough foresight to include some of the innards of a 360 to the Xbox One, and they were able to find a way to emulate the Xbox One's dashboard and everything, the entire console experience on the Xbox One for certain games that they were able to slowly expand. Now, ever since they've done that, there's been this idea that Sony doesn't care about backwards compatibility because they were not able to do the same thing with PS3. We've been told a number of times that the reason that PS3 backwards compatibility doesn't exist is because it's too hard to emulate.
Yeah.
And as much as people want to say no, they don't believe that's true, honestly, from how far, I'm going to say this, for how little people have gotten in terms of PS3 emulation, even now, you know, not every game is workable fully, even though the console is well past 10 years old. You know, when you think about it in that sense, the fact that PS3 is still not emulatable on PCs that have greater architect is not surprising to me that they cannot figure a way to make all these games run that way.
It's just because of the way the architecture works.
Yeah, so I don't think
like a roadblock.
I think it's unfair for people to paint Sony in that kind of picture, because prior to that, Sony were the champions. I mean, PS1 came out, PS2 came out with PS1 emulation, full. PS3 came out with a PS2 chipset and had full PS1 and PS2 backwards compatibility. The only time that it changed is when, and admittedly Sony's fault,
PS3 V2.
PS3 being so expensive and trying to find a way to get back on their feet meant cutting the cost of having the PS2 architecture inside, which at the point was quite a bit of money. And you know, that's why they had to sacrifice backwards compatibility. Some people think of essentially from the PS3 onwards, Sony have been against backward compatibility, but I don't think that's a fair thing for them because
they added it into a system which was a major supplemented feature.
Sure, and even then, I was going to go towards PSP, right? When PS Vita came out, PSP had full backwards compatibility of all digital games.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say...
Now, that's important because you can't be mad that not all games of PSP are emulatable. That's because of the fact that you have a difference
licenses,
in... not even that. You have a difference in format. You cannot put a PSP disc into a Vita.
Yeah.
So there's no way around it. For a lot of the games that never even hit digital stores, you just can't emulate
Crisis
them.
Core.
Oh, well. It's unfortunate.
Never hit a digital store.
Yeah.
So you cannot play it on the Vita, which is sad.
Yep.
Because somebody somewhere has that master file for that game on a CD that they can pop in and maybe do a server, a server, what is it called? Submit the game to the server and be like, hey, do you guys want this game?
Yeah. But
it's never that easy.
Yeah. So, when you think about stuff like that, I think that the nice side of it is for people who are really live or die on the idea of backwards compatibility and who stuck with Sony in spite of it because at the beginning of the generation nobody was going to have it. I think it's nice that it at least shows that Sony's thinking about it.
I am all for it.
I'm all for it too. I mean, and World End has had a lot of thought about this and how he thinks that it can pull things back. I don't necessarily know that I agree with that, and I do think that there's a
at this point, who are we trying to outpace? We already know Xbox, like the Xbox One X is stronger than the PS4 Pro. So whatever we come out with the PS5, it's going to be stronger than the Xbox One X. Well, I think he means
consoles in general, right? Because if Microsoft is thinking...
I don't think so.
Well, hold on. Let me just at least say why.
I'm
with you. Yeah. I'm with you. But I get what you're saying. But I think in his idea is if both of the leading hardware manufacturers in terms of pushing the technological envelope on a console, because we can't bring in PC because there is no cap, and you can't bring in Nintendo because they've been behind technologically for 4 generations now. Maybe because
it goes back to GameCube.
Well, GameCube was weaker than Xbox, but the GameCube was more powerful than PS2.
That's what I'm saying about.
So,
go back to GameCube is like, and then after GameCube.
Well, and the 64 was weaker than the PS1 in some ways, and then better in other ways.
Depends on what game you're talking about.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, and it just depends on what you're talking about. But I mean, I guess technically, say it had more raw power, but it didn't show it.
Yeah.
But when you think about it that way, Nintendo's not been necessarily synonymous with pushing the technological envelope. They just never have.
See, though, I am curious because when in this generation right now, you can say that the Xbox One X is more powerful than the PS4.
Yep.
And mean it, and it's true. Who is still selling more consoles?
Oh yeah.
This is a thing.
Yeah, and of course the Switch with its lack of power is still doing incredibly well.
Yeah, I think the Switch is going to outpace the Xbox One by the end of this year or next.
I think it's possible, highly.
My thing is that and I hate using this term, what I'm going to say, probably power ceiling. But here we go with the next generation. It's not going to be much more different than this generation. Is it going to be worth an extra $400 to shell out for the console? Maybe not for some people. Maybe it is for some. I know we'll be early adopters, but the thing is that we're not going to be able to see immediate return on this investment we make.
Maybe not.
I don't think we'll see it drastically.
I do get where you're coming from.
We need
but
features.
A lot of it, and this is going to tie back into the world end thing that I was getting to, is if both of these head manufacturers who are known for being the two that kind of push the power envelope more, and Sony is really known for pushing the power envelope. They've always been. I mean, the PS3, for all of its faults and the fact that it had problems, it still put out amazing looking games like Uncharted and Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us. These are games that still look good today.
Still perform games worse than the 360 though due to that RAM, which was
on multi-platform games,
which is what
generally performed worse.
He may be referencing that as well too.
But what I think he's getting at, and I get it, I really do get this. If this is his general idea, if both of these console manufacturers that are really trying to push technology and push the technological edge, if they're both thinking about backwards compatibility so much and trying to cram that feature in with the necessary hardware to make that possible, then that means that they're cutting costs from something else that could be going to pushing the console more, to where essentially the idea is that the console will be lesser than it could have for the same price because of the, I don't want to word it as the,
I want to say it's including a feature that is not used by all.
Exactly. Whereas otherwise, everybody who had the console has this same limit of what you can hit power-wise, and it's higher than it would have otherwise been if they're trying to say, we're trying to make a PS5 for $500. We're going to go up. We're going to make it $500, but $75 or $50 of that is going to be dedicated to this chipset that makes sure it can run these other things.
VR.
Yeah.
That's the thing, though.
And don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I'm on that.
I guarantee
on that front.
There's
but
more.
VR, I'm trying to think of how I want to word that. VR, at least in some ways, is at least a new frontier.
It's an advancement.
Whereas backwards compatibility is just peering back into the past.
Yeah.
Now, in the statement with you, I think I'd agree with yours. I think you would agree with this, that I do see a very big importance at making it easily accessible to see gaming's history.
I mean, yeah. See, and that's the thing that there have been, and I see a lot of people saying, like, I don't want backwards compatibility, keep it on my system. It's the same that you use with the VRME. If you get it and it doesn't affect you, or you're not going to use it, it's not going to affect you as much.
It's a wasted feature for you.
And I do think that with the way that we see these patents, with whether it is what looks to be like multiple processors, I don't think that's going to take away from any of the power of the console. You already got it. Like,
that's what I'm getting at. It would just take away from, let's just say that they spend $50 on that second processor, and then I'll let you finish. I just want to make sure that you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
But, that $50 could have been used to make the main processor that's made for PS5 games only even better.
Yeah.
So it would, technically speaking, take away from
how much is that $50 going to get you in terms of power?
I honestly don't know, because I don't understand tech. I don't understand that side of tech.
Even then, though, it
definitely, because $50, $50 goes a lot further in manufacturing than it does buying us, because there's bulk discounts on a ton of things.
There's bulk discounts, partnerships with companies, contracts, and everything.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I don't foresee $50 doing much at all per a single chip.
I will challenge you that, because I'll challenge you that by one thing. Have you ever seen a $50 CPU versus, or a $50 more expensive CPU versus a $50
returns on investment, or worse,
or a $50 higher graphics card versus another one?
Returns on investment are often worse.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that the extra $50 you spent is not worth the amount of money you spent to get the somewhat better results of what you would have saved.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. So do you believe that? Because if you believe it on the PC side of $50,
absolutely.
Let's just say that on manufacturing side, right?
It's
I don't know,
obviously.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but let's just say $50 on manufacturing side is equal to $100 as a consumer product.
Now that would be gains there.
That's what I'm getting at.
If that's what it would be, and
I don't know if it's true. That's just a hypothetical. And I mean, obviously, $50 in manufacturing is worth way more than what we get for $50 on the consumer end. But
we don't know how much. Those are specs that like it's a dead end argument because you can't prove on either side.
Yeah.
My whole thing is that when you look at it and you have. It takes roughly an $800 to $2,000 gaming PC. I mean, $1,200 gaming PC to emulate PS3.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell me, and that gaming PC alone can play games better than this gen.
Yeah.
At 60 frames per second, in most or some cases 1440p or 4K.
Yep.
Which I know 1440p doesn't mean much on a console because monitors and such, but I think it should still be an option. But you're gonna tell me that kind of power is not enough for the next PS5 because those PCs can emulate PS3s. It may be rough for them to do so, and it may. I just think that the way cell architecture and they're emulating it as well. I think that if Sony does a good enough job doing this patent the way they think that they will, I don't think it's going to take much more power than what we're already going to have. Because here's the thing: you're not multitasking on a PS5.
You are a little bit, but not to the same extent as on a PC.
Not playing two games at once.
Yeah, I get your point.
So here's the thing.
I'm saying that you're always multitasking to an extent because a lot of people will put like Netflix to sleep in the background, and that's why the system automatically limits 1 gig of RAM specifically for background processing.
Say that the PS5 CPU alone cannot emulate PS3 if not done right.
I mean, we don't know that because we don't know what the PS5 CPU is going to be based around chipset wise.
Exactly.
So this is all us talking as a shot in the dark.
As a complete shot in the dark. I think that the specs of the PS5 for what we're going to see are going to be, like I said, 50-50 on most people. It's going to be, do I want to spend $400 to get an extra 10 to 15 average frames per second with higher resolutions? You're not getting much more for some people. This is once again
there will be more than that, but I think I get what you're saying. Not enthusiast.
I'm talking about 50-50 in terms of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, do I want to get the system because of these reasons?
Yeah.
And this is all hypothetical. My whole thing is that you're going to have, if with this patent right here, with the way phrasing of multiple CPUs, and from what we're seeing, if it's strong enough to be able to even spoof multiple CPUs like that, what really are we losing?
I mean, I don't know because I'm not a console architect. So yeah, you don't even like speculating.
I don't even like speculating because it's dead end no matter what. Each side has a counter argument that is the perfect match to the argument itself.
Well, and see, realistically, it's us, waxing poetic or whatever about something that essentially probably could be answered by somebody who actually works on this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, if you work for Sony or if you are a console manufacturer of any kind, let us know how incorrect we are. It doesn't to me take the time of day. For me, this is more of a feature that if it's included, it's automatically worth the entry fee because it is a feature that many, many people have been on the fence about with PS4 wanting this kind of feature that Xbox currently has. And then I think that it's going to be a game changer for a lot. Do you know why? Biggest reason. How many people had PS3s who went to PS4? Say a million. How many people had Xbox 360s that went to PS4? Say 3 or 4 million.
I mean, I don't know about that, but I get your point. But there was a big enough jump from...
There was a bigger jump from Xbox 360 to PS4 than there was from PS3 to PS4 in my mind, right?
I don't agree with that.
You don't think so?
If you're talking about at launch, no, I don't agree with that.
Well, I'm not talking about at launch. I'm talking about now.
Even in general. I mean, I would say that majority of PS4 fans would realistically be longtime Sony fans, but there is a sizable chunk of people who came over for the first time to an Xbox.
I just not realized I phrased my comparison wrong.
Okay.
I was like, wait, how does he... I'm saying, okay. The amount of people who have played PS3 games who went to PS4, say 1 million. The amount of Xbox 360 owners who went to PS4 who have played PS3 games, 500,000.
Oh.
Yeah, the amount of people who have currently have a PS4 PS4.
Yeah, because jumping consoles means that backwards compatibility is pointless to them anyway.
No, it means that they can go back and experience all those games. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
As owners of previous games.
Yeah.
Backwards compatibility is still important to them as the ability to buy and play.
I wouldn't even say useless. I would say that it's
less
hitting for them. Yeah. Because there are plenty of people that have hit PS4 that are from 360 who missed out on Demon Souls or and it's kind of hard nowadays with all these remakes.
And remasters and whatnot.
Yeah, but there are, in speaking of PS1 and PS2 games.
I mean, Infamous 1, Infamous 2. Maybe you didn't play
There you go, right there.
Bam.
Those still haven't been remade
Maybe you
yet.
didn't play Killzone 1 or 2 or Resistance 1, 2, or 3 or,
Dude, there's so much gold to be had that like there will never be a real lull, I think, in Sony's market if this ever happens. At least for me.
There's not a lull in Sony's market right now.
Well, you get to like the 3 or 4 weeks before Red Dead. What do we have? Like, or I say 3 or 4 weeks, about a month or two, which is still 3 or 4 weeks.
I mean, there's still
plus
a lot going on, but
5 or 6.
I get your point.
Yeah, no, like I think that there's just, you offer this kind of variety to someone. I really don't think like the power we're going to be hitting would be taken away from something like this if built correctly. And I think that they would go into mind building correctly. You could still argue that it existing in the console would take away power. Same argument for PSVR. It's going to potentially take away the power that new chipset in the console that's using VR is going to use. And
well, a little and a little not. It's going to be money of having to put the chipset in that tells the VR what to do.
Right. Well, yeah. Cost of value.
Yeah. Cost of manufacturing.
Well, no, I'm saying cost to performance.
Yeah. Because the cost of manufacturing would affect that on the VR side. But I guess the argument still comes from the fact that VR is still mostly new games, are games being given to you in an entirely different, not just like Xbox One X enhanced or something like that, where it's
right.
Which don't get me wrong, it's a cool feature. I'm not, but it's essentially playing the same game slightly prettier. Whereas VR, if they remake a game in VR, you're playing it with a whole new perspective. You know what I mean?
And see, one of the biggest cool things about this to me is that we're just talking about exclusives that 360 players missed out on PS3. Do you know how many Harry Potter games, Spider-Man games, just multiple game series that have been multi-platform throughout the years of PS2 and Xbox, and PS3 and Xbox 360 that you can go back and replay? Like, that aren't exclusives. Like, if they get the rights to put these in there,
you can replay them easily. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you don't have to have all these systems, because like I've said it before. I want to go to where I just need one console for everything, and I'd like to have a console and a PC. I don't need anything else. Right now, that's kind of what I have. I have a Switch, which counts in there because it's a handheld for me.
Yeah.
But I want to be able, and when the PS5 comes out, I don't want to have to sell my PS3. I have to. I would like to keep my PS4. Cold medicine, and be able to still play the games that I want to play. But I would like to be able to sell my PS4 and get the PS5, knowing that I can play those games still on my PS5.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an understandable argument.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it makes more sense for people who are making the jump early on. I honestly think...
Yeah, early adopters are the ones that would benefit out of it the most.
I'm not going to say the most.
Well, I was going to say, and what's even better is that the later adopters, 3 or 4 years down the line, are also going to benefit out of it just about the same, because they're coming back to play all these other games that they didn't play on PS4.
Because honestly, I guess I'm going to retract my statement a little bit about early adopters. It's going to be one more notch about why it's easy for you to do it. But if you're already going to be somebody who's going to early adopt a console and deal with the potential problems they may have, or at least the lack of games they may have, the benefit that I saw in my mind was any game that continues to come out, like, let's just say that
Destiny 2.
Let's just say they pull a God of War 2, right, where a PS4 exclusive comes out after the PS5 already launches, like what happened with PS2, God of War 2 being a PS2 exclusive, even though PS3 had been out for a year. But, in that sense, it means that you can still play that game while they're waiting to build the exclusive library up for PS5, if that problem happens. Because that happened on PS4, but it may,
Well, and saying it this way, too, is that as an early adopter, you may be a person that isn't in a great, financial state of life, but they have really good deals to trade in your PS4 to get the PS5. The PS5
as an early adopter,
and the PS5 has backwards compatibility. Therefore, you trade in your console, which you're kind of trading in a brick to you at that point, because you're essentially about to have a new PS4 in a way. You're going to be able to play your same games. So it all comes down to another argument of disc drive versus digital. I think they should all be digital, because I don't think there's a way to make a disc drive that would be universal through all those. Like PS3, they're all Blu-rays. But being able to read through PS2, PS2 is not a Blu-ray.
PS2's a DVD though,
Yeah.
and you can play DVDs.
But I'm talking about
PS1's the only one in terms of PS4 right now. The PS4,
I don't think they'd be able to fit that much
there's
power.
a massive amount of people who don't realize or don't know that the PS4 can't even play PS1. Or can't even play CDs at all. Music CDs.
It can't play
or
DVDs without
games.
having to download the DVD player app, right?
Yeah, I don't know for
download
sure.
a media app. I'm pretty certain. I'm like 90%.
No,
certain.
that was on the Xbox One that you had to download a media app to play DVDs, because I remember having that
sure?
problem. Yeah, I'm fairly sure. I don't think I ever had to download anything for DVDs, but to be honest, it could be a problem on both of them. You know what I mean? So, but either way, I get your point, but they're all disc. So if you make a disc drive that can read them all, then it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And most disc drives can. I mean, do you remember how many people got on the Sony for not having a disc drive that could play 4K Blu-rays on the Pro? You know?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do think it was a missed shot there.
I mean, I think so too, but what I was already wanting to get to, and this just helps me segue into it, is that Sony has stats that show them how much people do or don't care about these things.
Of course.
And so does Microsoft. And even if we want to talk about all the buzz that people give Microsoft around backwards compatibility, it's still a woefully underused.
You are comparing numbers, though, that are drastically different. You're comparing a one user base with millions and millions and millions of players when you're comparing another one with just millions.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but they're also two different things. What I was getting at is that, yeah, as far as if we're going to use that as the analog, PlayStation not including the Blu-ray 4K drive, is because statistics showed that most people who consumed media in general that wasn't gaming did so streaming on PlayStation.
Yeah.
So as far as they were concerned, make it to where you can do 4K HDR streaming and you're still good.
What a lot of people don't realize, though, is that like that isn't exactly what I would call an offer. That's what I would call an incentive. And like what that is like whenever I'm going, it's one of those things that you weigh up in your mind that you're not sure you would ever really use, but it would help you kind of coax yourself into a decision if you were faced with a decision.
Fair enough.
I would realistically, if I got a brand new 4K TV, like a nice sound bar, and my PS4 played 4K Blu-rays, I'd go buy 4K Blu-rays and play those. I don't think I would go buy a 4K Blu-ray player.
Yeah.
But
having it as an extra feature in a console,
if I was coming down to like, if I was
if you only use it 4 times,
well, I was in like, let's say if I'm a new gamer and like I want to go and buy the newest system, I look up the specs and I'm like Xbox One X versus PS4 Pro. Which one do I want? And then I see a 4K Blu-ray player and I'm like, well, I have a 4K TV I'm playing this on, obviously, to take full use out of these consoles. You're like, I might as well go with that because I can watch all my movies that I can buy on that instead. Even though they may not be used, it's one of those things that a consumer thinks of before when they're buying.
I agree.
It's something to keep in mind. That's something you can't track.
And that's what you're saying with backwards compatibility as well, is you may not ever use it. Because that was what I was going to. Is statistically, most people don't use backwards compatibility anyway. They didn't on PS2. They didn't on PS3. They don't on Xbox One.
Which is crazy because now I've seen more outcry for backwards compatibility than ever before for consoles. And
it's just that vocal minority thing, or people who are being, and this is what I'm gonna say, people who are that are describing exactly what you want. People who want the feature even though they may not realize they'll never use it.
That's a very real thing.
Some of that ties into just general outrage culture and people being mad about everything. Some of it ties into people trying to champion things that they don't even care about or don't involve them. I'm not saying care about, but that don't involve them.
Yeah, that's a weird breed of people sometimes.
People who are like, and I don't mean this derogatorily. I mean people who look at other people's plights and go, well, even though I don't have that plight or that plight doesn't affect me because I don't care about that, I don't want those people to have to suffer. So I'm going to fight for backwards compatibility because I want them to be able to play their games.
Yeah.
There are those people that exist. So I think when you see that, and realistically, I'll go this far. It's people who are definitely in a consumer market like this. It's people who are looking at the consumer and going, if that was going to affect me and I didn't have that would really piss me off. And that's what they do. It's more about the idea of like, if I was in their shoes, how would I feel? So instead, I'm going to champion for them this idea, and that's fair, and I get that. And
it's not something I really agree with in a way.
I mean,
it's like,
that's a different conversation for a whole different thing. I guess going back to backwards compatibility.
I'm just talking about when you're comparing numbers.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare on who is saying that because of that reason, and who are saying it because they want it.
Yeah, of course, we don't know. All we know is a percentage of people are really as far as on our side, what we're seeing is social media. How many people don't even use social media like you normally?
Yeah.
You have Twitter because of the show,
right?
But before the show, you didn't have social media.
I don't have a Twitter. I should specify that. I help partner. Me and Brett are partners with the Triangle Square Twitter.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
and I have a personal Twitter that I never get on.
Yeah, I don't have a personal anything anymore. I don't have a personal Facebook, MySpace, Google Plus.
MySpace. Google Plus shut down, I'm fairly positive.
No, it shut down like a week, I think. At least from recording. But yeah, like For me, it's one of those things that it's like it's always hard to gauge because there's people who are saying that we should get it, but they're not saying they would use it. But then again, it's one of those things that's I've seen a lot of people use it, and that might be even something that we could do. Maybe the day the show airs, make a poll on Monday saying if backwards compatibility is a thing, would you use it?
Yeah,
and kind of just gauge the people
even
that
from from our listener base,
and see. Obviously, it's not going to be accurate to the overall user base of the console, but it'd be interesting to see because I think that it's always a fallback feature, and I like calling them that because for everybody, it's a fallback feature. Playing, you may not have, but $10 or $50 to play. Well, hey, maybe that Harry Potter game from your childhood is on the market, and hey, there might be a lull in gaming right now. There might be something to play, kind of like now in a weird way. For some people, if they're not playing Kingdom Hearts, you're waiting for Anthem, or if you're not playing Resident Evil, you're waiting for Anthem. If you're not waiting for Anthem, you're not really waiting for a whole lot right now, like Crackdown 3, I guess. So,
Far Cry New Dawn, Metro Exodus. So there's actually, I would actually argue against you in the fact that the first 3 months of this year, January is the 1 month.
That's what I'm saying. Back from Christmas up until February.
Yeah, because you have
there's a month
weeks
in
a row. You have Ace Combat, Resident Evil 2, and then Kingdom Hearts 3. That's a pretty wide spread.
It is a pretty wide spread.
I would say that most people probably had at least one game that they were excited for.
I'm not
saying most people. That's probably unfair. But a lot of people had
at
least one game that they were excited for in January. But February is loaded.
Even then, like May, we don't know what's out yet, but say May doesn't have any games coming out.
Sure.
Similar to January for some people, a very low amount of people, I'm sure. But, this could fall back on to like, you know what? And I actually did this. I'm telling a story that I'm trying to make a hypothetical thing out of it, and I actually did it. And I didn't even think about it till now. I downloaded Bounty Hunter, the Star Wars PS2 game, the PS2 classic game on PS4 because it was during a time, which was funny, it was right before I started trophy hunting, which is one of the reasons why I started trophy hunting, because there was a lull in gaming and we had nothing to do. So I started playing Titan Souls.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to start trophy hunting with, besides Bloodborne. But I downloaded Bounty Hunter and I played 5 or 6 hours of that. I didn't even get too far into it, and I was like, this is so fun. And then of course started trophy hunting. But it's one of those things, it's like, if this was a thing that I could fall back onto constantly, I would always have a game to play, because there's always games from my childhood, or always games from my teenage years, or always games from 10 years ago I couldn't even play.
Or in this current climate where we get so many games, there's games on PS4 that exist that you don't even know about that you haven't played.
Of course. I still want to go grab, what is it called? It just came out on the Switch. It's like Advanced Wars.
Wargroove?
Yeah, Wargroove. I still want to go Wargroove. I still want to get Resident Evil 7. So yeah, I still want to get Resident Evil 7, but Resident Evil 2 more so. It's hard. But I will say that when that lull comes and there's a feature for me to fall back on, and I know I'm not the only one like this. I know there's
I get it. Because okay, I'll give you a slight analog to what you're talking about there, and then we can kind of roll down out of this. But yeah, I get your point. And I mean, if we're going to take something like backwards compatibility and go back to that analog of Blu-ray 4K player being in the system, I didn't care for the longest time because I'm really not a big movie person. But now that I've bought this 4K OLED,
you want to see what it looks like.
I only want a 4K Blu-ray player for one day just to see what my TV's max potential is.
You've never seen John Wick, have you?
No.
That would be the one to get.
Okay, well, anyway, my point being is that I'm with you, and I understand that I did have that thought flow through my head of like, it's not a feature I would really use often.
But it could be something that can evolve into that, though.
Yeah, you also think about that, and that's been some of that. So one of the things is that, of course, I had that first day. I was like, I wish I had a 4K UHD with HDR so I could just see this thing cracked out at max. But even then, I just went to Netflix and popped on the first episode and watched like the first 20 minutes of Altered Carbon.
Rip data.
And boy, I was like, oh, this is so good.
Rip data.
Yeah, so, it was one of those things where I was like, this is crazy. But I still want to see it on a disc because streaming still has... You're still streaming. You're still dealing with a lesser,
your bit rate's worse. Your compression's worse. You get the crushed blacks. I can't think of what that's called right now.
And actually, no, that's not been a problem on that TV. I was actually, because it doesn't have the backlight and it normally leads to that.
For somebody who doesn't have a $1,300 OLED,
yes,
that's
I know.
Always a problem with streaming.
My point being is that when you do something like that, I did have that thought float through my head, and then actually thinking forward about like, well, this was a big investment, but what can I do with this TV? Me and Hannah don't really get to go to the movies a lot, but we want to have as close to a movie experience as possible.
That would be
if I had a 4K Blu-ray player in my PlayStation,
exactly,
then I could, and I'm planning on moving stuff around in the game room anyway. So when you think about it that way, it would give me the ability to use that TV, which is big and has deep blacks, which is exactly what you get from a projector. That's why people go to the movies. Actually, answering Richard's question, if he hears this from in the Discord earlier, he said, "Why do people go to the movies?" Well, because most people don't have a TV that gives true blacks.
No, he wasn't.
Blacks.
He wasn't really answering a question.
I mean,
asking a question. He was being facetious.
but he's
like me. I hate going to the movies.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't enjoy going to the movies,
time.
but he said it in a smart way of like, why would you? Well, there are actually pretty compelling reasons. Massive screen that most people don't have.
Jalapeno popcorn with the cheesy salt and the butter.
But yeah, I did that same thing in my mind where I was like, I could essentially make
cherry Coke.
I could essentially make a small for just me and Hannah, or maybe me and if a friend wanted to come over and be like, you haven't watched this movie yet, but we're gonna watch it.
Boy, I got list upon list for you.
Yeah, pop surround sound in. Like have surround sound in the room after I change it all around, and then have that TV and blackout curtains everywhere, and to give you essentially as close to a theater experience as you're ever going to get. And I think that's essentially what you have. So yeah, forward thinking, there is something about that. There is a nice thing to it. I think for most consumers, even like me, it doesn't stop me from doing anything.
What's crazy,
but like you said, that fallback feature is nice. So I'm with you. I'm not against backwards compatibility. I just think I always see, and this is maybe even to a fault, I always see both sides of everything. I can see why Sony might not want to, but I also think it's unfair to say that Sony hasn't cared about backwards compatibility, because as a company, they have
say that though.
Historically, they have more often than not.
I've yet to see somebody say that.
Oh, man, I guess I must see the wrong parts of Twitter.
I must jump on Twitter at the wrong times, I guess. I will say, though, that because
there are people that have said that, and they're definitely, this is a wrong group of people to be, I guess, the group that you go to look at for everybody. But I mean, definitely, it's another one of those things that those people who are part of the console wars try to fling at Sony. It's like, oh, they don't even care about backwards compatibility. That makes sense, that's a different group of people, though, and those are people that are looking for an attack. Yeah. They may not even care about it as much as they're looking for something that's a weakness,
if PS5
or conceived as a weakness.
Backwards compatibility, it's game over, man.
Game over for who?
Who do you think?
Say it, Saul.
Xbox.
Oh,
I hate the word Xbot, like an Xbot.
Yeah,
just like I hate Sony ponies, but. Everybody should love video gaming regardless. This isn't about console wars.
We're all good.
I love Xbox games just like Brett does. He loves Forza and Sea of Thieves.
Oh yeah, both fun games.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say I love Sea of Thieves, but I enjoy my time on it.
Yeah.
I
loved my experience with Sea of Thieves.
Exactly. That's what I would say. I don't even know that I love the game as much as I love the ability it gives me to play and just have fun with people.
Destiny 2.
I think I might agree with that.
Well, thank you guys for joining.
Let us know your thoughts on backwards compatibility, if you would like to see it in the PS5, what you think this patent means. Is it just a patent that they're trying to do just to have the ability to put it in if they decide they want to?
Oh, new question. If you could have a PS5A with the exact same specs as what it would be coming out without VR, and it has VR built in, or would you rather have B that has a backwards compatibility built in? Which one would you rather have?
Oh, if it came down to just those two?
Granted, this would be the same spec regardless of what you picked.
Okay.
And it would be if it came out with those not included.
Yeah, you would just be. I get your point. So, if it came down to Sony saying, well, not
VR
that this would ever happen,
compatibility, which one would you pick?
And the console wouldn't be any less or more powerful anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good question. Let us know in the comments below. If you don't have YouTube or you're not watching on there, hit us up on our Discord, which we did not mention. If you like that, the link is in the description below for that channel. You can hit us up on Facebook,
timestamps will hopefully
or on Twitter. So you know what?
Because they still aren't up for episode 96.
Saw slacking.
That's my fault.
About to make me put the shoe back in the closet.
Howdy.
You know what? I think that this is the end of this episode. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to our patrons, Chad V, Dan Barber, Josh Jarrell, Mikey 12, my name is Dan, Douglas Below, Sean Santarud, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, Travis Below, The Stonard, Blake Popst, and we also have Mr. Stefan Swanland and another new one that I'm trying to go and remember his name right now. My boy Stefan. And we have a new patron as well that his name is escaping me, and I need to go update this page right now. But you know what? You know who you are, and we're going to fix that. You'll be on next episode. This is all done live in real time. But we love you anyway.
Brett's pointing into the camera when it's not recording video.
Because I'm so used to looking at the camera. Until next time, this has been Triangle Square.